The next section is about the cap, or the lid that pops off to protect the contact lenses. There's some really interesting aspects to this part of the tutorial. So we're going to derive this. Let's press the N key from the existing geometry. Press the Tab key. Let's go ahead and turn off our symmetry, and we're going to turn off subdivision surfaces. Let's come over into face mode and double click to select this loop of polygons. Press Shift and D, and then the Escape key, and then the P key to separate this to become its own object. Press the Tab key. Let's go ahead and select this, and I'm just going to call this cap for right now. That'll be sufficient. In fact, I'm going to remove this old object. So let's come back over to cap, press the Tab key, and we need to extend it just a little bit. So let's come over here and go into wireframe view, Option Alt Z for X-ray, A key. Here again, we're going to use one of our tools, which is the shrink fatten function. Let's make sure that we are in active tool mode. Click, hold, and drag, and we're going to extend that out just a little bit beyond what the current geometry is. Let's come into the front view, switch over to vertex, make sure that we're in select box. Let's select these top vertices, G key, Z, pull it up just a little ways above it, something about like that. So let's come over, Option Z. I'm actually going to have us isolate this for right now. Press the F key to fill that on the top, Command R, and let's add a loop right about there. Let's come back into the front view, switch over into face mode. Let's go to selection circle. I'm going to come back to the move tool, and we're going to select, let's go to about that far. So I've got 4 polygons on either side of the symmetry point. E key, and then Y, and we're going to pull out about like that, and then S, Y, and 0 to flatten that. If we look at this in the top view, we're kind of looking at this angle right here. So there's a cap, and the cap has a little easy flip top extrusion over here that makes it easier to pull the lid off. So if I press the S key and X, I basically want to match kind of the angle that I have right here, and I'm eyeballing it, and I'd really like to make sure that it's actually quite accurate. So we're going to come over and select this polygon here. That's the reference angle that I want to make sure I'm repeating along here. Let's come up here to where it says Transform Orientations, and we're going to change this to align to the normal, and then we're going to create a reference angle from that polygon that we can use for a bunch of different polygons. So then come down here and select this polygon, and if we look at this from the top, you can see that there is a slight angle mismatch, and that's okay. But I want to come back here and select this and do Shift S cursor to selected, so that when I select both of these polygons, I can press the period key and tell the pivot to go to the 3D cursor location. Then when we come back into the top, if I press the S key, type Z, and then type 0, I can get that flattened exactly to that angle. Let's go ahead and repeat this process on the other side for practice. Select this polygon, press the period, and then take the pivot point to the active object, Shift and S, and we return the cursor there so we can use that as a reference point. Let's come up here to face. Let's remove the first one, set the orientation to normal, and then create a reference from that so that when we select both of these, press the period key again, make sure that the pivot point goes back to the 3D cursor location. Then when we come up here, you press S, Z, and 0, and there we go. So let's come to the front here. I want to take all of these faces and flatten them. So let's come over into vertex, and I want to use this vertex as a reference point. Period, go to active element for the pivot point. We need to remove this. Let's go back to global and then type S, Y, 0, and it flattens that right there. Okay, so let's take this edge and this edge, period key. We're going to go back to bounding box center, S, X, and let's scale that in about like that. Let's use our knife tool. Let's come up here to the top, press the K key, right about here, come down, Z key, and then C, so it projects all the way through, and click and return. Perfect. Okay. Now, let's come up to the top in general. Let's come over here. We're in selection circle. Hold the shift key and let's just select all of these. Context menu, and we're going to do a dissolve face to put an N-gon up at the top there. Go ahead and press the I key, and we're going to pull this in right till about there. Something about like that. Now we've got two vertices that are really close to each other. Let's come over into vertex mode, bring up the context menu, and then do a merge by distance, and it should show that we removed 2 points. Okay, now let's come up and remove, we've got a bunch of hard edges that are sort of remnants of the original geometry. Press the A key, N key, and let's come over to mean crease, and let's just remove all of those assignments for this geometry. And then on the top, let's dice this up. So J key, here's one of our primary tools. And in fact, we can do it this way. Click, click J, and then click, click, click. We can do this one in one fell swoop like that. And then here to the center and J. There's one other area that we want to come in and add a loop, and it's to control this here. So we actually want to put 2 control loops in. So Command R, and let's come to right here and put one in there. Click, Command R, and let's put one about right there. Click. And there we go. And then at the top, we're going to come in here, hold the Shift key, click here, and again, use our connect path function. It's such a useful function. Now, this is interesting up here because we're using a subdivision surface object, but this N-gon and this N-gon, I'm going to leave. And we don't really need to do anything with this because it's in a planar region, and that really works well for us. So we're just going to leave those right there. Let's come up and select this loop at the top, and let's come back to our friend the bevel tool. We'll do 3.5. And we want to change to active tool, click, hold, and drag, and let's just add a fillet at the top about like that. That works well. Let's come to the top. I accidentally came here and here, and I don't want to have those edge loops in, so I'm going to do a dissolve edge. But then, because the center point is right here, let's come over into face mode, select both of these, and then we'll just do a triangulate faces. That's nice. It points right to that center. Now we need to come in here to the bottom and fill this in because this is going to be a closed volume. So go ahead and select here, press the F key, and then I key and inset that just a little ways like that, E key and pull up, and I'm going to go just about this far, about like that, and then we're going to come back to the bevel tool. Let's do 3, we're in 0.5, active tool is great, so I can come over here like this, and I can just give it a little bit of rounding right there, and then Command R for here to put a bounding loop there. 3 key selects this face, and I puts a bounding loop right there. Now, we're at this position here where I've intentionally sort of goofed on this, where I didn't actually outset this far enough to account for the fact that when we did the inset here, it was going to overlap onto the original geometry. Press the semicolon key to go back into the main scene here. Let's go into X-ray mode, and we can see that we have overlap going on here. Well, let's say that you have the height worked out. You've got the height the way you want it, but you want to expand and scale everything out. There's a cool feature that Blender has that will allow us to do this. So let's come in, Option Z takes us out of X-ray temporarily in vertex mode. Select that top vertex, Shift S, do cursor to selected, and then do the period key and take the pivot point, which is our scaling reference, to the 3D cursor. And here, if I use the move tool, we can see that right there. Now, what I want to do is kind of get a reference point. We'll look down over here, Option Z again, press the A key to select everything. If we press S, normally you would scale, you would restrict it to a particular axis to scale. So we'd press Z and you can see we can scale just along the Z. But I want to do the exact opposite of that. We want to scale around all the axes except the Z. So you press Shift and Z, and then we can scale out, and we can scale until they're no longer overlapped. And let's zoom out and take a look at this at kind of a macroscopic scale here. Let's do this again. S key and begin scaling it uniform. Press Shift and Z, and now it will only scale in a radial fashion. Okay, so that solves the overlapping problem for us. Now we just need to come in and we just need to make sure that as we look at this, it's still just slightly overlapped. So let's do it one more time. S key, Shift and Z, and now I can pull that out. My eye is looking right about there, and I'm no longer overlapped, but I have maintained the height that I wanted originally. Press Option Z, and let's come in and add a little bit more detail. I'm going to go into isolation mode. So on the bottom, let's select this loop and this loop. Once again, our bevel tool, you see how many times we've used this tool. It's so wonderful. Go to a 2-1 configuration, click, hold, and drag, and add our bounding loops there. Double click, and now let's add some hard edges. Now, the way I tend to do this is if you come up to edge, there is an edge crease here, which is Shift D. So you type Shift D and then simply tap 1, and it automatically assigns it to 1. It's really fast and easy. And the benefit is that you can now just do Shift R. So if you double click here, Shift R, and you come around here, Shift R, it repeats that last command. We can do the same thing here, Shift R, and let's select here around, and then Shift R. So remember, I know that I can do that because we did this inset, and this loop here is planar to everything going on in here, and that is the condition for applying this hard boundary. When you have these two planar loops, it just keeps all the curvature on this side where you want it, and it prevents the curvature from going into these large flat areas. So then we just come up here. Let's do one more time here. Shift E, 1 again, and there we go. And we'll do the same thing here. We'll just do Shift R to repeat that. So we're now finally ready to connect this with a little connection strip to the main body of our contact lens container. In preparation for joining the two models together with that connection strip, we're going to add Command R one more loop here in the middle. Okay, backslash key to leave isolation mode. Let's look at this from the left view. So now we need to connect it because there's this connecting loop that comes down about like that. So the first thing that we need to do is kind of establish where that's going to be. And we need to actually finally join these together. I'm going to remove the modifiers from this top one, and we're going to select both of these with the original mesh as the active, and then we can join these together. So now when we go into edit mode, they're back as a unit. So we need to come over here and isolate some polygons that we want to actually kind of pull out and extrude as the beginnings of this connection strip of plastic. So let's come in and take a look at this from the back. And in face mode, I'm in active tool, so I'm going to switch over to selection circle. I'm going to select these 8 polygons right there. Then press the E key. It's going to intelligently sort of deduce what direction I should go pull these out just a little bit like that, and then do it again. E key one more time, pull out a little bit further. Let's return the pivot to the center of the selection by doing bounding box. Do S, Y, and 0 to flatten that out. I need to get the two pieces of geometry, islands of geometry, aligned. So if you look, we have each of these loops right here, and we need to get the loops that are corresponding to them pretty much aligned and ordered. So the center one is obviously aligned here. So let's come into this one. Let's go into X-ray, and I'm going to come back into select box, and we're going to select those. And then I'm going to come back up and select this as a reference. So it's the active selected element, period key, and let's take the pivot back to that location. And then I can press S, X, and 0 to align that and click. So let's do the same thing over here. So I'm just going to repeat this pretty quickly. Select that, S, X, and 0. And then let's do the same thing over on the other side. So you see I'm flopping back and forth between X-ray and not X-ray. S, X, 0. And here, S, X, 0. Okay, so we've got these back areas aligned. So I'm going to come in, let's go back into X-ray, and I'm going to make one modification by selecting these here. And then I'm going to select these, and I want to scale these out just a little bit. Period key, we're going to go to bounding box center, S, X, and I kind of just want to scale these. This is just going to make it so it's a little bit less round in this area. Okay, so now we need to connect them. And the way that we want to do this is taking all of these polygons. So if we do select linked flat faces, and we want to transition these and blend them into polygons down here. So in this particular case, I have 4 polygons that we're going to be going into. So we're going to have to figure out that transition, and it's not too difficult. So these are the polygons that they need to transition into. But we first need to establish sort of a center between these. So I'm going to come over here to this center point right there, and this center point, and the pivot goes between them. So let's do Shift S and cursor to selected, which puts it right there. Tab leaves edit mode, and we need to establish a reference curve. So we're going to press Shift and A, mesh, and then circle. Let's do 0.25. Okay, so let's just scale this now. And I'm going to get that center so it basically matches pretty close up to the center of each of the locations that we need to merge. Let's come back down here. Let's come into edit mode, and I'm going to remove the polygons here, 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 so that we have these 4 rows of polygons will become one polygon. So let's do a dissolve faces, and that prepares that for merging. And we want to add another control loop down here. So I'm going to come in route right here, X key, and then draw over to that location and return. Looks like I overshot one too many, so I'm just going to do a quick dissolve edges on that. Okay, now we're ready. So we're ready to come up to the top. And let's take all of these, select linked flat faces. Let's just go ahead and dissolve that into a single polygon to match the polygons that we have below. Let's switch over to the side, and now we're going to use this really cool tool called Extrude to Cursor. We've been using the other extrude tools, but now we have a very specific situation for this. If we look at the resolution of this reference curve, I want to put a piece of geometry about every other one. So the way this works is you just come over here and click, and it just extrudes to the cursor's location. And I'm doing about every other, like that, and here, until I get down here, and then I'm going to add one more final about right there, and then I can take and do a loop slide GG to sort of taper and transition that in a little bit. Okay, So now what we need to do is just blend these together, but we don't have quite the same number of vertices and edges to blend. Use the knife tool, K key, come over and hold the shift key, click, click, and hold the shift key and click and return. And then let's do the same thing over here. K key, shift, click, and shift and return. So now that's selected. We just come here and select this, context menu and bridge faces. And there we have those bridged. Now we do need to add just a little bit more control geometry. So let's come over and press the K key and let's just draw this in. I'm just going to eyeball it because that's good enough for what we're doing. Come down here and return. And then let's anchor this right here to here. And then here we want to do a slightly different configuration. So we'll come over K key from this location. And I want to hold the shift key and come to the middle of that edge. And this is a really good transition type. So we'll just come over like this and create that. We've got a quad here, and that'll create a nice transition. And I'm not super worried. These are very small details if they're not perfectly precise. But let's do the same thing on the other side. K. And then here to here. And then K key down at this anchor point to the center, and then grab that. Since we're in global, I know that this is good to just grab these. And there we go. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to do a slight modification here and here. And I'm going to pull those down like that just a little bit. And there we go. So now we are ready to turn back on. In fact, I'm also going to come in, hold the control key down, option E1, and I'm going to put that as a hard edge, a crease. And now we are ready to look at it. Let's turn back on mirroring, and let's turn back on subdivision surfaces. And there we can see our final contact lens case. And they're all joined together. So I hope you found this to be a useful tutorial.